Speaking Human.
Today on Speaking Human, we crown the champion of our best jingle bracket and answer a few big questions about Pepsi, United, April Fool's Day, and Christopher Walken. Fasten your seatbelt because this podcast is about to punch you in the face like United Airlines customer service.
Speaking Human.
Welcome to Speaking Human, where we simplify the world of marketing for humans. I'm Shad Conley, and with me is my co-host, Patrick Live Boulder Jebber. Isn't that what they're calling you these days?
Yes, they are. Only when I carry my can of Pepsi around.
It's defused so many situations.
It has. I mean, it's an icebreaker when you're talking to somebody and you just walk up to them and hand them a Pepsi can, and then you hear that crack and the fizzle.
The fizz and gooey cornstarch overtakes them.
Yeah.
I don't know what's in Pepsi. So anyway, we have a show today filled with big questions. And we're going to answer these questions, Patrick, or we're going to try to. But we'll kick things off here with an easy one. Our first big question of the show. Which brand was the winner of our most memorable Jingle March Madness bracket? It's an easy one because we already know the answer.
That is true. We do know the answer.
Our championship round came down to 2 jingles. Was the winner this one?
I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. They got a million toys at Toys R Us that I can play with. I want to be a Toys R Us kid.
Or was it this one?
And like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Watch this. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hey, Dave. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
That's your agent. Hey, Sarah.
Patrick, why don't you tell the people which of those jingles took home the ultimate glory of winning our bracket?
Ladies and gentlemen, the winner is your very own good neighbor, State Farm.
Just a quick recap for you. So State Farm wins. It takes down Toys R Us. I want to be a Toys R Us kid. Previous to that, it beat Bob Evans down on the farm in round 2. And in round 1, beat Kit Kat. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. So took down some, big competition there on its march to the championship.
Yeah.
It was somewhat of a shocking win. Once again, another one of these matchups came down to 1 vote. 1 freaking vote. That's how close this matchup was. State Farm in the end squeaked by Toys R Us. It was crazy.
Yeah, and what was interesting about that, just like in the first round, there was a huge swing. I think Toys R Us was in the lead most of the week.
Yeah.
And then State Farm just pulled it out by 1 vote, so.
Yeah, we closed the voting on Friday, and I want to say around Tuesday or Wednesday, Toys R Us was up by like 7 votes.
Yeah, it was about that. We mentioned it in episode 78, the original one that we started the bracket. There were a lot of factors that I think contributed to State Farm's win. It's shorter and sweeter, and it's still widely used by the brand. So in the end, I think that's what helped it clinch it. But, Toys R Us, still a great brand, and from a nostalgic standpoint, I love that jingle. So
a lot of these votes were going to depend on how old you were. And we even said with State Farm, I think that one has the most kind of recency to it, where it's still on TV a lot. You see that a lot more. Toys R Us is kind of an older one, known by more from 20 years ago than now, whereas State Farm's still going now, so it has that recency factor.
yeah,
And Toys R Us, had a good run. I think I predicted on our last show, I thought Toys R Us was going to win this one, but on our first show, I predicted State Farm was going to win it all. But when I saw how the rounds of voting were going, I thought Toys R Us maybe had some momentum.
yeah. Well, like a good neighbor, State Farm's there. Still there.
And it is there until the end. So I love this bracket. I had a good time watching all the voting this year, and I thought it was pretty entertaining just to see which of these jingles the people went for in these different matchups.
Yeah, it was the best bracket we've run through Speaking Human, so I'm excited in the future to see where that takes us, for our next bracket next year, March
Madness. We'll have to
Madness.
start thinking of some new ideas, and if, you listeners out there have any ideas, marketing or branding related for these brackets, like a bracket we can do next year, send them to us via email. feedback@speakinghuman.com. Let us know your ideas. So we'll have to think of something. We've done emoji marketing. We've done fast food marketing. This year we did commercial jingles, so I don't know what's next. Maybe social networks pitting them against each other or something like that. I don't know. We'll have to think of something good.
Yeah, there's a lot of options. We're always looking for feedback to see what the listeners want to hear and see.
We love the humans. We want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. In a minute, we'll answer some big questions about Pepsi, United, April Fool's Day, and Christopher Walken. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
Today's episode of Speaking Human is sponsored by Monsters Unlimited. When you need an agency to advise you against insensitive ad campaigns, consider the marketing geniuses at Monsters Unlimited. They know what people will likely hate and will help you avoid a crisis of infinite proportions. Visit thinkmonsters.com for more information.
That was an audio clip from the now infamous Pepsi protest ad featuring Kendall Jenner. That ad was greeted with immediate disdain and controversy, and yet it may not be the worst thing that happened to a brand this month, which leads nicely into our first big question. Patrick, what's our first big question here?
Which brand is having the worst month, Shad? Pepsi or United Airlines?
So, this is a good question.
It is.
Because it's tight. It's tight. Talk about a good matchup. Maybe this could be a bracket, marketing brand meltdown, something like that. So Pepsi, as I touched on, aired this ad that they created with model/reality TV star Kendall Jenner, where she's doing a photo shoot and she sees all these protesters coming out. There's music playing over this whole thing, and so she leaves her modeling gig and jumps into the protests. She gets there where they're all collectively at, and there's like a line of police there. Everybody stops as she walks up to a cop and hands him a Pepsi. And he cracks it and drinks it and smiles, and everybody cheers. Except for the people who are watching this ad, who made social media and the internet go crazy. They were just not a fan of this ad. What did you think of the ad, Patrick?
I thought it felt like a Pepsi ad. For all intents and purposes, it felt like a Pepsi ad. The music felt very Pepsi-ish. The tone of the ad felt like Pepsi. And then it just sort of like has this weird turn where you realize that they're basically saying that Pepsi would solve
all the world's problems.
Yeah, which I get it. As a brand, you want to have this sort of idealistic, maybe utopian idea of your product and, have some sort of voice in this very tumultuous world we live in, a voice that, might solve problems. But it's also a very naive view of how things really work.
Yeah, I'm kind of I view it in the same way. I can see both sides of it, right? Mm-hmm. I can see where Pepsi was going with this. There is some sort of good intentions there and some, brand tenets they've used in the past. This voice of a generation, connecting everybody thing. And then you see the other side of it, why people hated it so much or why they found it offensive or just generally kind of stupid, While it is well-intentioned, it's clueless.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to create this idea of Pepsi as this multicultural brand and part of the youth movement and everything like that, but it just approaches it from this very clueless is the word that comes to mind, and very white perspective. And I think a lot of that is Kendall Jenner being in there and their use of her within that ad. I think if she wasn't in that ad, I don't know if people would probably still think it's dumb, but I don't think there would be the outrage that we're seeing now.
To me, it was just so bizarre the way that played out in the ad, where she's in a photo shoot and then, some guy nods at her and tells her, like, come join this protest. And then all of a sudden she solves the problem by offering up a Pepsi. It's a weird series of events that leads to the end, which is where, like you said, if they hadn't had that portion of it, maybe it might have done better. I don't know.
Say she's cut out of there, right? Say they cut out the whole portion with her. You have these other people they profile for a minute. There's like a photographer and the guy you were talking about who winks, you know. What if it's just we follow these people, they're going to this protest, and then even you see the people at the protest and the police presence there just interacting in a friendly, non-oppositional way, and then, you know, the people in the crowd are drinking a Pepsi. Mm-hmm. I think that could have worked if you take out this shoehorned white celebrity at the center of it all and this message of Pepsi solving all the world's problems. I think you could have something there that would have worked in that version.
Yeah. That might have downplayed the tension a little bit.
Just because these people are protesting and there are police there, why are they in opposition?
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily true. People have protests, and police come to anything where people are gathering together in large crowds to make sure, you know, everything's safe. Why does it have to be a tension there?
Yeah, yeah. Like we said before, you know, I think they were trying to be hip and cool and relevant, and it just came off as insanely insensitive and out of touch with reality.
Yeah, and obviously selling a product on what is a hard reality for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
It does raise the question, though. Should brands be doing politically charged kind of marketing? We're seeing that a lot this year. I'm not sure that it's working very well for any of the brands who've done it. Do you think they should be doing it?
The problem is that people are always going to be frustrated with monetary gain from something that is a social issue. And that brands, when you're selling your product on the backbone of something that is clearly a problem in society or our cultural issue, don't expect to get raving reviews. You know what I mean? Like, oh, they made the whole world better by advertising their product through this. Because, you know, in the end, they're a brand, they're a product. Clearly trying to gain something out of it, right?
Yeah, it just rubs people the wrong way. And you're right, these two things are in opposition. Trying to be this voice or call attention to this thing while you're selling a product, they're just by nature kind of butting against each other, right?
Yeah, I mean, Pepsi is really not designed to solve any problem other than people's thirst for sugar, you know, in this situation. So.
And the level of that, maybe if Pepsi has a commercial where they don't show Pepsi at all, you know, and they're just trying to call attention to that, that's one thing. But when you have somebody walking up, giving someone a Pepsi and solving every problem we've ever had in the nation and the world, that's, you know, not the best. So let's get to our other contender in this matchup here, United. You want to tell the people a little bit about what's going on with United right now? What happened to them?
What happened was there was a United flight, and it was overbooked. United came on the flight PA and told the passengers that they were overbooked, but they had employees. They had, I don't know, a handful of employees that needed to be somewhere for some reason, and they needed them to be on the flight, so they needed people to give up their seats, and then nobody volunteered, so they basically said they would pick people at random. And they asked one gentleman leave the flight, and he refused, and they dragged him out of the airplane by force. And, you know, everybody recorded this on their smartphones. The brutal reality of him being dragged out of the plane, being almost beat up because he hit his head and those kinds of things, it just tumbled out of control because I guess he got back on the plane and he was crying, like ranting, you know, please just kill me. I mean, it was
a scene
from a real standpoint, you know, like seeing it as raw as you could possibly see it, you know?
Yeah, this wasn't a bad commercial or a, you know, mistimed social media post or anything like this. This was human interactions gone down the most terrible path possible. I mean, and really, you have this guy being punished because he bought a ticket on this airline, essentially. The whole thing was just crazy. And there's also been some questionable handling, you know, since then. I know they put out like a memo to employees saying it was the guy's fault. And then a day later, you know, did a public apology to the guy it happened to. And they used the language, we had to reaccommodate the passenger, which is just hilarious corporate speak BS language that people know is ridiculous. Their stock, United Airlines stock, has just kind of plummeted since this happened. So they've actually lost a lot of money out of it. But on the good side, We've got some great memes.
Yeah.
People coming up with these new slogans for United Airlines, like, why beat our competitors when you can beat your customers?
Yeah.
Or, we treat you like we treat your luggage. And my personal favorite, not enough seating, time for a beating.
What was Southwest? It was, we beat the competition, not you.
Yeah, which was pretty clever. So, you know, the internet and social media has just kind of had a field day with this one. It's just crazy to me. It's crazy to me also because, one, overbooking in general. This wasn't totally an overbooking thing because they were trying to get those employees on, but the fact that you sell more tickets than you have seats at any time is crazy to me. And the fact that somebody buys a ticket and then you're telling them you have to leave this plane, even though they did everything right, bought a ticket to get on this plane, and then you're like, no, get off.
Yeah, from a customer service aspect, if they really needed those employees to be on that flight, you ask for volunteers. If nobody volunteers, then you go about and you figure out another way for your employees to get there, right? That's just the reality of it. These are paying customers. Like other people have said, you could incentivize them. There's no volunteers, you know, with the initial incentive. Give them a better incentive. And if that doesn't work, then you know what you have to do? You have to let it go. That's the reality of it. I mean, that's what's so crazy about this whole thing is that these are paying customers, right? I mean, I don't know how you could make such a fumble of this magnitude. I'm sure if the CEO knew that something like this would happen, they would have clearly made other choices. But the people on the ground, the people who are your customer service representatives, should know better. How they thought it was going to be okay to have security remove this guy, and that was going to be okay, that was going to go over okay with people, it blows my mind.
A series of terrible decisions. And I think you're right, going back, all you had to do was some extra incentive, right? So you offer people vouchers to get off, and people are like, nah, I don't really want to get off of that. I want to get home. But then you tell people, all right, we'll refund your flight, put you on a new flight, and give you the vouchers. I mean, you got your 4 people.
Easily.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right there. Maybe $1,000 it costs you, as opposed to the stock tumbling, which has lost the company like $400 million.
You have to evaluate at that moment in time, what is it worth for you to have those employees make that flight? Even if it costs them the money to put them on a different airline or whatever it would have been. You said it perfectly. It's just some poor decision making all the way around. And how easily, like, just making some dumb decisions like that can really snowball out of control.
Yeah, it's a good example, and I think it'll be a good example that's referred to for a while of what not to do with customer service.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, you know, talking about these both brand meltdowns or train wrecks or whatever you want to call them on a high scale, I'm sure you saw the good, you know, it's going around on Twitter now where Pepsi's like, we just did the worst thing we could possibly do, you know, in terms of hurting our brand. United's like, hold my beer. That's kind of the new thing everybody's using is the hold my beer, where you try to one-up them. So what do you think? What's the biggest brand meltdown of the month? Is it United or is it Pepsi?
I think by a long shot it's United. And the reason being is that A, it could have been easily avoided, but B, this is what I call a real world situation, you know, that needs to be addressed at the highest level. Like, you know, Pepsi's was clearly a major fumble, but comparing the two, I think there's a clear difference between advertising ignorance, which is what the Pepsi ad demonstrated to me, and then physically harming your own customers in real life with real people, right? I think it would be United from my vantage point.
I think you're probably right, but I went for Pepsi.
Did you?
And here's why.
Okay.
Yeah. My thinking was this United thing's kind of like a localized thing. So it's a big deal right now, but it's kind of a single incident within this larger company that has snowballed and will probably fade. I don't know what the long-term impact's going to be on customers, but it's an isolated thing. As terrible as it is and as bad as it's been, you know, Pepsi's thing kind of came from the top. You know, this was a thought-out strategy in an attempt to attract a young audience, and they totally botched it. You know, it was kind of like a statement ad they were trying to make, and hey, we're trying to hit this group, whether it's millennials or Gen Z or whoever they're trying to get with that. And they screwed it up, and I don't know where they go from there or what kind of long-term impacts that's going to have, because that's what a lot of that audience that they're trying to reach is going to remember about them for a while. So I was just thinking more, this is a top-level thing from this brand as opposed to United having this PR disaster on the ground level.
I see what you're saying, and I think that's a good argument. I mean, you're sort of seeing it from the vantage point of top down versus something that's at the ground level. You've got people who are making bad decisions versus, executives or higher ups making bad decisions, advertising executives, whoever that is. And is it a systemic problem in the company on both sides? Is it worse having it come from the top down or from the bottom up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tough call.
It is. It is. The reason, though, that, like I said, I call it a real world situation. Pepsi, they made light of something that is clearly very intimate to a lot of people, the social issues of today, and what people are protesting over. But it is an advertising problem. Whereas United, I mean, they physically hurt somebody.
Yeah,
and they did
it's a human problem.
Yeah, that's a human problem in a way that is going to really stick with people, I think. Just a very different type of mental reality for people. Whereas one is sort of fantastical and the other one is right up in your face. So,
yeah, I think you're right. And I think most people would probably agree with you on that one. Maybe going back to Twitter, what somebody said is, if only this guy on this flight would have handed the flight attendants a Pepsi, everything would have been fine.
Yeah, I saw that. It's given a lot of ammo on social media this month for sure.
Yeah, usually we just get one of these a month, so the fact that we got two right in a row is just a glorious social gift to some. Terrible thing for these brands, though. Anyway, so that's where we stand on that big question. That was a tough one. This one's probably a little easier. So our next one is April Fool's Day, recently passed, has become a big marketing holiday. So the question is April Fool's Day prank marketing from brands played out? Because we're seeing a lot of this. From Honda to the Weather Channel to Buffalo Wild Wings this year. We saw all sorts of brands all over April Fool's Day this year with their online gags, different fake things they're telling you, or I think it's a lot of fake products is what you're seeing from a lot of different companies, fast food, or even the Weather Channel was like our new...
Launching a new forecast that predicts yesterday's weather today.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. Which... those were coming up on my iPhone as updates and stuff, which mildly entertaining. But what do you think? I don't know. Is this getting played out for you? Do you think it's definitely become more saturated? We're seeing in the past 5 years, it's gone from maybe a handful of brands doing this to like almost every active social brand doing this.
It's almost become sort of a Black Friday kind of event where everybody's doing it.
That's a good comparison, yeah.
Yeah, personally, I like the creativity that goes into these, and I think brands should be doing more of it. They're having fun with their marketing. I think this is an opportunity for them to do things that they wouldn't typically do. Do I think they're all good? No. But I think brands could do more of it for sure. Maybe they can't do that at other times of the year, so April Fool's tends to be that time.
And I'm kind of torn on it in that respect. I like what you're saying. I like that this is compelling brands to jump in and do things a little differently and, get a little weird and wild with their, especially social and online, which tends to not be as fun as it should with a lot of brands. They're getting a little looser with it and doing some creative things, which you always like to see. It's just the concentration of it. From a consumer perspective, seeing all these things and they're constantly assaulting me, it's almost falling into that white noise category where I'm like, all right, I get it. Fake this, fake that. That's enough. I've had enough. I can't take it anymore. It's getting to that point because there's just so much of it. I don't even want to listen to any of it.
Yeah, I like that you use the word assaulting. They're assaulting you. You just got united.
Yeah, I'm getting united by the internet on April Fool's Day.
I get where you're going with that. And I think that, just like we were talking about with Black Friday and some of the things that were happening around that a few years ago and just getting out of control, I get it. Sometimes oversaturation of something can be a negative. Like I said, I'm seeing it from the side of, from a creativity standpoint, but in general, I think it's healthy.
So let's talk about some of the efforts, some things we liked and didn't like. Adweek had a pretty good recap of what a lot of the big brands did for their April Fool's Day pranks. What's something that you liked that you thought was a good one?
I thought as simple as it was, I liked the Pet Lexa from Amazon. Basically, it allowed animals to order things on Amazon. They just bark and it would be like, ordering new dog food or something. I don't know, whatever it was. I thought it was cute. And then the other one I had as just a witty little cheesy every pun intended on this one, is the Cheetos spray tan. I thought that was...
Yeah, that was decent.
Yeah.
Got to get the Cheeto-colored folks in the public spotlight, I guess.
Yeah.
One of the ones I liked was one of the crazier ones I saw, which I could see why some people would hate. In a year when everybody's out there doing these things and going to a certain level, this went a level farther. And that was a funeral booker.
Oh, did you?
Which I guess is a UK website, funeral directions search service. So they pretended they were launching a service for home cremations.
Yeah.
Where they would kind of bring this machine to your backyard and you could cremate somebody. I mean, talk about going all in, right? That's pretty dark, pretty crazy, but also, kind of funny. And it just, like I said, it went that one step farther to make it stand out for me amongst the pack there. Though I could see how some would not find it to be funny in any way.
Funny you mentioned that one, because
Is that one of your worst?
That's one of my bad ones, only because while it has sort of like a dark humor to it, which I'm known to enjoy from time to time, from a brand perspective, maybe a little too far
Gone
over the
too
line.
far.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
But I really don't know how they could have made that any better. But
And for something like, obviously it's UK based, but
I didn't even know there was such a thing.
no, I didn't either. I've never heard of funeral booker. And now I have. I'll always remember that.
Yeah.
I think it'd be different if a funeral home did it versus that service doing it. So it was okay with me. It was just under the line.
So what would be something then that would be your bad? If that was your good, I want to know what your bad is.
My bad one came from The Knot. The Knot is a site for people who are getting married. So their prank was telling users that their wedding checklists were deleted.
Oh, that's horrible. I didn't even
So
see
this
that
thing
one.
people set up on the site, they told them theirs were deleted, and then when they went to the site, it was, hey, it's just a joke, and then they gave them like some special deals or something like that. That to me is crossing the line. That's like, sending people into a panic, There's a lot of these things too that, I don't know, some of them are clear, and I guess even the funeral booker one, maybe you don't know that that's a joke. Right? And there's a lot of them like that. Even I would say the Alexa one, maybe you wouldn't know it's a joke.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of the gag. I don't know what that's doing for you marketing wise, right?
I get, like sometimes it's not a clear delineation between reality and fake. So those ones, you run the risk. You run the risk of someone going, I didn't know that wasn't real. And then you get negative backlash from that, and you got to be really careful, especially when you're messing with your customers too, like The Knot. I didn't even see that one, but you have the potential of infuriating your customers, which is not something you want to do. You want them to laugh and think it's funny, but you don't want them to be like, that's not cool.
Yeah. Why did you make me panic? Why are you ruining my life? Not delete.
You know what I'm not going to use?
Another one I just didn't think was very good was the Chicago Cubs did this thing on Twitter where they pretended like a game was being played. They were up like 25-0 and all these amazing things were happening. There's another example where some people are going to just see that in passing and be like, it's real? There's a game going on right now?
To me, that's where it doesn't work for every brand. It just won't. Every brand can't take advantage of April Fools. Don't just do it because you can. I mean, do it if you've got a good idea. I'm all for it.
It seems like everybody just feels like they have to do it now to me. Obviously that's subjective from person to person, as we see with Funeral Booker, but most of them to me were just, they're there. They did it because everybody's doing it.
Yeah, and, get some third-party opinions maybe, too. Everybody's going to feel this is the greatest idea ever when you're internally thinking of ideas, and you'll be like, yeah, because they're all probably like-minded individuals making that decision. But, get a few extra opinions, Say, if you were our customer, how would you feel about this? You'll probably get some differing opinions, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think our thoughts are a little different on April Fool's Day marketing. I think it's a little played out. You're all right with it? I think that's kind of where we fall on it.
Well, there are a healthy number of April Fool's Day marketing efforts that should not have seen the light of day. I'll agree with you there, but I think brands should be doing more of it for sure. Not more of it outside of April Fool's, though, because I don't need to see fake stuff. I see enough fake news now. I don't need to see fake brand news.
Well, then, let's get to our final question.
This is a good one. In honor of Christopher Walken's recent birthday on March 31st, we asked the question, what's the definitive Christopher Walken movie? What's the first movie you think of when you think of Walken, Chad?
For me, it was kind of a tie. They both are kind of the same. He's doing the same thing, though. And they're Pulp Fiction and True Romance. Pulp Fiction, obviously, everybody knows. Tarantino's breakout movie. True Romance, written by Tarantino, though not directed by him. But both of them, same thing. It's Walken delivering Walken-esque monologues. Mm-hmm. You know, as only Walken can. Pulp Fiction's got the more famous one where he's talking about the watch, the gold watch, to a young Bruce Willis. Just great Walken. And that's kind of where my mind immediately goes. And in True Romance, he kind of does the same thing. Just comes on for what's basically an extended cameo to just deliver this monologue about how he's the angel of death, basically. So those, for me, are the ones that stick in my memory as, like, Walken doing Walken before it became, like, the parody of Walken that everybody does. What's yours? Like, what do you think of?
I pick a little bit more recent movie. If you haven't seen it, Balls of Fury.
Oh, interesting.
Where he plays, you know, a characterization of himself. Mm-hmm. So I love that version of him because it's a very silly version. And then I also think of, oddly enough, I think of The Dead Zone, which was...
That's a good one.
That's an old movie. It's not really Walken the way you think of him today, which is, you know, the over-the-top, more cowbell version of Walken, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Walken turned up to 12, but he's good in that movie. He's very intense. It's got like the Walken intensity to it.
Yeah, and then I always remember him in Batman Returns. Again, a very different version.
That's more the, like, you know, turned up Walken. Batman Returns, a movie I kind of love. Very strange movie.
Yeah.
Rewatched it not so long ago, and it's a weird movie for a Batman movie.
It is. Just overall, I mean, there's so many examples of good Walken.
There is. We'll have a, you know, link in our show notes that has a list of the rankings of Christopher Walken movies where you can vote on Ranker. There's like 100 movies with him on there where he's prominently in the movie. You know, our next kind of part of the question is, what do you think is Walken's best performance? Mm-hmm. I'd go to Deer Hunter. He's so crazy intense in that movie. That's kind of what vaulted him to stardom. I think he won an Academy Award for it. And he is just, man, intensity, like balled up in that one. So it's Walken when he was very, at his most intense, less kind of funny Walken and more like serious Dead Zone intense Walken, I would say.
The majority is with you on that because it's what's listed as number one on Ranker. You mentioned it. I thought he was really good in Pulp Fiction. Again, I go back to the Dead Zone, two greats from him. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily going for like what makes him funny or serious, but just movies I enjoyed seeing him in.
Yeah, and he's, when you look at the whole thing, he's pretty versatile because he does have these serious, intense parts and then these really kind of funny roles where he can adapt his delivery to any of them. Side note real quick, the description of him on IMDb of Christopher Walken is amazing. Let me read it to you real quick. I don't know who wrote this. It's awful. Nervous-looking lead and supporting actor of the American stage and films with sandy-colored hair, pale complexion, and a somewhat nervous disposition. I don't even think of him as a nervous... Do you think of him as being nervous?
No, I don't know if that's a great description of him at all. I don't even know if that's describing him. I think that's describing someone else.
No, like,
that's describing...
Nervous, pale guy.
That's describing the dude from The Social Network. What's that guy's name?
Jesse Eisenberg.
That's describing Jesse Eisenberg. Or the kid from the new Verizon commercials who's also in Silicon Valley. That's who that description is for.
That's what I think of as nervous. Walken he seems the opposite of nervous to me. I'm not nervous.
Yeah. So what's his most underrated movie or performance? What do you think?
I think I got this one. Most underrated performance is the movie The Rundown. Did you ever see The Rundown with The Rock and Stifler?
Yeah, I love that movie.
Once again, he's like the bad guy, and he gives one of his great monologues about the tooth fairy to a bunch of people who don't even speak the same language as him, so they have no idea what he's saying. But it's walking the line there between... Walking the line! Did you see what I did there? Between... funny and, you know, scary bad guy.
There's something about him, you know, even when he plays a bad guy, like, he's not real like a foreboding bad guy. I feel like if he was the bad guy in a real life situation with me, I'd be like, you're awesome. Maybe
he's not. Yeah, he's not like the scary bad guy, but he's very threatening.
Yeah.
But he's kind of like the wild card bad guy. Like, this guy's kind of crazy.
Yeah, those are the ones you have to watch out for.
Stares at you with his threatening walk and stare. And that's how you know it's probably over for you.
They're disconnected.
That's kind of what he does in True Romance.
Yeah, like totally disconnected from reality. You know, those are the people you have to be afraid of in life, I feel like, you know?
Beware of the Walkens of the world.
Yeah, I'd say the most underrated performance is Fatboy Slim Weapon of Choice music video.
Ah, that's good.
I love that so much. I could watch that a million times.
And he's got moves.
He does. He's got moves. And you know what's so great about that, and maybe why it's a little underrated, is it doesn't have him being him from an acting perspective. It's all facial expression and dance moves. So it's not him and his intonation of his voice, you know?
Yeah, and that's yet another side of Walken, right? It's not the funny Walken. It's not the intense Walken. It's kind of this smooth Walken as a performer, like he was when you see him on Saturday Night Live and stuff. He's a performer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sides to this guy. That's good. That could have also been Walken's best performance. I'm kind of jealous. I wish I would have thought of that.
Yeah, it's hard. You know, I have a great quote from Walken, and I'll leave you with this, and I'm pretty sure you've seen this. It's Life Lessons from Christopher Walken, and it goes something like this. It actually goes just like this. None of us are getting out of here alive, so please stop treating yourself like an afterthought. Eat the delicious food. Walk in the sunshine. Jump in the ocean. Say the truth that you're carrying in your heart like hidden treasure. Be silly. Be kind. Be weird. There's no time for anything else. Was that good?
I'll say two things about it. It's one, the content was very profound.
Yes.
You know, you got us thinking Walken. Number two, best Walken you've ever done, hands down.
Really? That's saying a lot. Thanks. Appreciate that.
You're going to re-listen to that over and over, and that's your most glorious moment, I think.
We're like, whoa. I basically just channeled Walken.
It's definitely your most glorious moment on this podcast. It might also be the most glorious moment of your life.
Literally 15 seconds of fame.
Imitating somebody else who's famous?
Imitating someone else who's famous, who no one will ever think it was a great Christopher Walken except for just maybe us.
Well, I mean, in comparison to other Christopher Walkens I've heard you do?
Yeah, that's true.
Top of the list.
That's probably true. Yeah, it was fun.
Did you feel like you had climbed into Walken's skin?
I felt like I just John Malkovich'd Christopher Walken.
Nobody Malkovich is Walken.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great final question. And final quote. Thank you, Christopher. Happy 74th birthday.
We love us some Christopher Walken. So that's it for today's episode, everyone. You can find current and past episodes of the podcast at speakinghuman.com. While you're there, sign up for the weekly emails and let Speaking Human come to you.
That was a little walk-in pause right there.
Yeah.
Email us with your thoughts on today's show. Or let us know your favorite Walken movie. Feedback at speakinghuman.com. That's feedback at speakinghuman.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Speaking Human. Catch you then, humans.
Speaking Human.
Good night, room. Good night, moon. Good night, cow jumping over the moon. Please, children, scooch closer. Don't make me tell you again about the scooching. You and the red, chop chop.